Happy Monday, everybody.
Happy Monday, everybody.
Here in the roastery office with Jared,
Oh.
and we're starting our week. Hopefully, you're starting yours. We've got a humongous bank of questions, so thank you for anybody who wrote in questions. And we're going to real time pick out a couple heaters
Oh, yes, we are.
and just drop them in.
Man, it just depends on what we're interested in talking about today. I mean, there's the fun, simple ones that could be really helpful that aren't simple for the people, but simple to talk about in terms of teaching to dial in and developing team members' palettes.
Actually, let's take that one because you've been doing that right now, like in real time.
Yeah, we've been doing that across the board, especially a lot on the cupping table with palette development. It's really fun. It's really an interesting subject. Should we just start there?
Let's just start there.
and just see what happens. 'Cause
Yeah.
that's an interesting and fun discussion because it's such a thing.
Okay, let me take a deep breath. Let me smell my espresso one more time.
Let you hit the smelling salts and let them just woo kick in.
So, if we're starting with brand new coffee people, meaning they're
Right.
brand new employees,
Uh-huh.
and most people have had the experience of having coffee in a place like this, but maybe not thinking too deeply about it.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got people who, I'd say probably 80% of the people who come in on staff are some sort of latte drinker.
Sure.
Overall younger crowd. They're
Mm-hmm.
drinking lattes, maybe with flavor on it. Maybe they have a daily chai habit.
Yeah, I was gonna say a
or-
lot of them are not even coffee.
Yeah, something like that. To the point of where sometimes I got asked a really interesting question last week where one of our newer team members, because I ordered a decaf espresso in the afternoon because I'd already hit my caffeine quota.
For sure.
And she said, "Do you actually like the taste?" And I said, "Yeah, I love the taste." She's like, "So it's not just a functional thing for you? It's not just about the caffeine?" I'm like, No. I really enjoy the taste, and then my caffeine tolerance has gone down as I've gotten older. I just have
Right.
to be more careful about when I take it in, so I'm not tweaking out all night."
No doubt.
And she's like, "Okay, cool." She's like, "Yeah, I'm trying it and I'm not quite there yet, and it's just really intense." And I said, "That actually makes perfect sense." One of the ways I used to talk about it was if you've never had espresso in particular and you are you're tasting it for the first time, it's not too different than if you were a little kid sitting around the dinner table at a holiday and all of the adults are drinking beer, wine, whiskey, or something
Sure.
like that, and you're young and you're just like, "Mom, can I have a sip of that?" And they're just like, "Fine, yeah, take a little sip." And you have a little sip and you're just thinking, "This is the most disgusting thing I've ever had in my entire life. How the hell could grown-ups drink this? I got my soda. I'm perfectly happy.
Right.
And you guys are drinking this wine thing that just makes me want to barf in my mouth."
For sure.
It's just super intense, really unfamiliar. And that's how I feel like a lot of people are interacting with espresso.
Totally.
Because it's a super concentrated beverage.
Yeah.
You
Tastes
know,
unlike it smells.
Tastes
when
unlike
it gets in your
smells,
mouth first time.
and
Yeah.
it's just super, super aggressive. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So I think on one end with espresso in particular, I think it's important to acknowledge that
Yeah.
and not pretend like the new barista is going to be able to taste all of the nuance that you taste, all of the subtlety, immediately be past the intensity, which it's undoubtedly intense.
For sure.
And
No matter the roast level, too.
no matter the roast
Yeah.
level. Yeah. Even the lighter roasted, longer
Yeah. All of it.
pulled shots are, they're pretty gnarly if you've never had espresso
And
before.
for the geeks out there, we're talking like the big volume, like low extraction yield in terms of percentage. Like, yeah.
Yeah. And,
It's totally.
and I don't think there's anything wrong with acknowledging that, walking people through tasting that, and then we'll walk through how we taste espresso in a second. But
Yeah.
I just want to put that in my pocket, and we'll just say, cool, we'll start there with espresso. In terms of palatal development and coffee, if we're bringing people in and doing an initial menu tasting, again, there's a million ways to do a cupping. And depending on what the focus of the cupping is, you'll approach the cupping completely differently, even though the steps are the same.
Absolutely.
So when we're bringing in people who are new, we're really looking at it from a guest focus perspective, because the biggest goal, first and foremost, for any new cupping, I'm like, can you tell the difference between this coffee and the coffee that's next to it?
Right.
Let's forget about
Just can you tell they're different?
right.
Yeah.
Forget about flavors. Forget about peach or caramel apple or acidity level or whatever. It's just this is different than that. Okay, cool. Do you like one more than the other? Yeah, I like this one more. Okay, let's just talk about why and allowing people to pick their favorite and kind of go down their own rabbit hole. Because for new employees, we're trying to help them help our guests get the coffee that they're going to enjoy most.
Yeah.
So we're not approaching it from a super nerdy perspective initially.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
We're trying to paint a picture.
Just
And
kind of setting that tone.
yeah, I think the only additive is just you're setting a place for them to say, okay, these are all different. And then I think you're setting a tone to say, hey, we are also, we're not going to talk deeply about this, but these coffees are intentionally developed and selected to fit this menu. And that begins that process where the person goes, oh, I can actually think about this on a deeper level. And these guys do, and this team here does. So I don't maybe get it yet.
Right.
But I now have the foreshadowing of they're pretty into coffee for real. And I can definitely taste that it's different. I don't really get it. And that's great.
Because you can understand that this thing that you maybe categorized as one flavor, i.e., coffee tastes like this.
Right.
It's this hot brown liquid I drink in the morning. Maybe I put cream in it, and it's just coffee. It is its own flavor.
Totally.
You go from that to, oh, there's 6 different coffees on this table. I don't really know what I'm tasting, but I can tell they're all unique and interesting in some way.
Right. And that's perfect. That's a win.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's an awesome first step.
There's no way to get past time and tenure when it comes to tasting anything really.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can't expect anything less than that.
Yeah. And then
or more than that.
when we're setting up a table for a new hire cupping, or if I'm doing a cupping with someone who it's their first cupping, it helps to create a table that's really dynamic.
Yes.
You don't want 6 washed centrals from somewhere in the same region. It's just, you're not
They
doing
can't be
anybody
close.
any favors. Yeah. You're going to have some sort of naturally processed Ethiopian coffee. Probably I love putting something on Kenya in there. There's always like a big jump from when you go to Central and South America to Africa, if you're picking
Absolutely
the right coffees, and just have a variety. A dark roast is fun
Your
to
roast
have on there
levels,
too.
your blends versus your single origins. And,
Yeah.
you don't have to. It's hard not to when you're so excited about your coffees, but you don't have to break them all down for the team and be like, yeah, that's the 3 beans. You taste this, this, and this. And it's okay. Just put them all on there.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to step back and get into that beginner's mind. And I think that's one of the key things that makes a really awesome educator or teacher is understanding where the people that they're trying to bring through this process are at.
Yeah.
And knowing, okay, cool. I've been doing this for 20 years. Of course you're not where I'm at and you're not tasting what I'm tasting, and that's completely fine. Yeah, like it would be ridiculous of me to treat you the same way that I would, like if the two of us were engaging in a cupping and we're going
Way
uber
different.
nerd zone. You're just stroking your own ego at that point. It doesn't
Well,
really make
a
any
lot
difference.
of people fall into that trap being excited too. I mean, a lot of business owners and leaders, they're like, well, you work here now, so you have to be at this level immediately. And it's like, that's so hard. Yeah.
I used to do it a lot.
Yeah. And I mean, it doesn't come, just to validate you all, I get it. It comes from a good place. It comes from a place from excitement and enthusiasm and care, but there needs to be a little bit of logical reality. And that's that even if the person cares as much as you do about this situation, that they're not necessarily going to get it yet. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And it also doesn't negate how awesome they are too, if they don't get it.
Sure.
Yeah.
That was one of the mistakes that I made early on in my training career is I had all that enthusiasm and I was trying to break down the nuances of every little thing to every person, and I would get frustrated even with my family when I would bring coffee home to my family.
You don't get it.
I wouldn't run them down the ladder, I want to run someone down the ladder. Okay, cool, you've been drinking Starbucks or Pete's.
Yeah.
If I'm at Cat and Cloud, I'm going to bring you home, Night Shift or The Answer or something like that. I'm not going to go right to the lightest, most strange and interesting thing, which I used to do. Yeah. And then people were just being like, yeah, I don't really like that. I'm like, you guys don't even get it, dude. This is what I do. This is the best coffee.
Totally.
You basic plebeian.
I would try that too. And then I'd try to do it in a fun, I'd be like, okay, well, I'd do it at Thanksgiving. And then the next year I'd be like, okay, I'm going to do it, but I'm going to I'm going to blend in 10 to 20% of the Night Shift to the single origin coffee. So that's like, and it would kind of work, but it took it to anyways. I realized at the end of the day, like year 3 out of these like 8 years in a row, I was like, no, we're just going to go night shift, and then I'm going to bring this other coffee, because there were people who wanted to geek out with me, but they still didn't get it, but they wanted to, and that was kind of, anyway, that's the fun. The coffee guy's here, let's taste it. I'm like, all right.
Now I've got your attention.
Now that I've got your attention on your Bonavita, plus, yeah, that's a whole other thing too, is brewing on other people's, anyway, we're not going to go there. That's a whole different thing.
Oh, I did that one time. I was at
different people's devices and waters and all that stuff. It's just
man, I was at my brother-in-law's house, and he's got a Encore. He brews his own coffee.
Yeah.
And he has our coffee subscription, so he gets our coffee. And I ground some coffee, and I just looked at it, and it looked really, really coarse.
Of course, yeah.
And I said, I don't know. And I just tightened it up and kind of adjusted the grind visually.
Tasted worse than his coffee.
It tasted so much worse.
Dude, my dad's coffee was the same way. I was like, he's like, anyway, yeah.
I couldn't see the fines, I guess. I couldn't see the particulate spread.
It's people dial in their own brew setting, and they got it a lot of the time. Anyway, so yeah, we're back. We start
right. So if you're kind of introducing broad strokes, allowing people to taste the difference between coffee, and just kind of allowing them to get some sort of interest. Because if someone cups and they feel empowered, they're going to want to do more. If they go to a cupping table and they don't understand anything that's going on, they're not going to want to participate and contribute. So if you can get someone, okay, can you tell the difference between this and that? Yes. Cool. Do you have a favorite? Yes. Let's talk about why. Done.
Yeah.
You're good. Right. And then you kind of walk them down or walk them up the ladder, and you get to, I mean, at any given point, there's just so many different levels of cupping and palatal development going on. So I'll give one example, and then I'll kick it over to you, because the stuff you're doing is really interesting right now. So aside from initial training, initial cupping, one of the things that our baristas do in the cafe is, we've got the Answer, which is our flagship blend that's brewed all the time, no matter what. And then we've got a couple single origin options on the fly, some of which the baristas can pick themselves. And then when someone comes on before every shift, everybody tastes the range of coffees, usually, ideally with a coordinator or a team leader. So the coordinator is pouring out a little bit of all the coffees as people are coming onto their shifts. They're tasting coffees with them and just kind of walking through it and having a conversation. And now, at that point, let's say, the person's been on staff for a few weeks to a month, how would you say, the safety bumpers are kind of coming off a little bit, and you're having more of a, I don't want to say real, but more intense conversation.
Sure.
And what I mean by that is, if you're identifying the differences between coffee at the most basic level, that's a big win. But then once you start to progress, you have to add some sort of objectivity into the mix. We have to start being able to identify flavors, and we have to be comfortable saying yes or no.
Sure.
I.e., taste is subjective, but we have to have some sort of objectivity in it. So if I have a coffee that's overwhelmingly chocolate, low tones, has zero citrus, and we're walking through a tasting, and one of the employees is like, yeah, I'm really tasting a lot of orange in there.
Right.
Okay. Well, let's talk about what you're tasting, but it's not orange.
Yeah, yeah, it's not. You're not getting that car right now. I'm sorry.
And again, it's not from a place of ego. It's to help people be able to communicate with the coffee to guests, ultimately get them what they need. So we'll have that happen every day, because cupping, just like anything else, or tasting, it's a skill. And if you don't practice it actively, you're not going to stay as sharp, and you're not going to improve. And there's a difference between taking, even if it's just 1 minute, to taste coffees with a small group of people, have a 30-second chat about each coffee, kind of break it down and learn every day, versus just simply drinking an 8-ounce cup of coffee because you need some caffeine and not really thinking about it that
Absolutely.
much. So engaging in that process is something we do every day. So we're just setting the stage with the initial, and then, we've got these systems in place to ensure that people are cupping all the time, or tasting all the time at least. And then, so what I want to talk to you about is, like, one of the things that you've been doing is working with the whole roasting and QCing team.
Yeah.
People who already have really developed palates, who've been working in the industry for years, and we're kind of, I mean, you tell me.
You're diving
you're
deeper.
refining it. Yeah, I'm like, how has that process been?
Well, it's a lot of fun, because, to speak even just briefly to what you were saying before, one of the natural progressions. And I think the reason that you and I and a lot of the professionals fell in love with coffee is truly that genuine interest in just like, I'm tasting this coffee every day and noticing that it tastes a little bit different. It's the same coffee. And being somebody who's naturally inclined to dive into the whys and get behind the scenes, it's been really, really fun because ultimately we're trying to build common language, common understanding, and calibration between multiple departments. We got Dulce and green buying. It was a Q grader. And so, she's already got, at least by industry standard, a really high understanding of that scope, cupping for quality, cupping to just identify, period, we'll call it. And then you've got, Mark, who's head of wholesale in his team, and he's been in the industry forever too, and has a really deep connection to especially coffee, a bunch of different people's coffees. And then we have the roastery team who's interested, but they're creating the product, and they are, manipulating in a roaster what happens and how it comes out. And so what we're trying to do across the board is calibrate so that each of these departments can speak to what's happening in a cup and be able to help communicate to the roastery team, what may we do to take something and either elevate it or reduce it or balance it, et cetera, down the line. And so the answer here is feeling complicated and trying to make it simple is that we're doing building blocks, and the building blocks, essentially start in one place, aka Dulce, who cups this coffee at a sample roasted level, an incredibly light level, and finds out what it's going to taste like. And even with her kind of being relatively new, the learning for her is like, okay, I'm able to use my voice with these people who, Mark has a lot more experience than Dulce. So helping her find her voice to be like, this is why we picked this coffee. It's got these flavors in it, and this is what we're trying to get out of it, so that, okay, cool, Mark and the roastery team can go, all right, are we tasting that? Because Mark's got a ton of experience. Are we tasting as much of that as you expected? Mm-hmm. And can I communicate that well to the people externally? And then the roastery is like, okay, we're roasting it like this. Is it or is it not, coming to the table and expressing what we want? And that alone has been kind of the trifecta of where I'm trying to meet them all by way of just tasting coffee all the time. And then my job in that space is in that way a trifecta to help the roastery team understand what can happen in the roast to be able to bring out and or play with those flavors. And then the other way is to help both Dulce and Mark understand what's happening in there, because that's not their job, to be able to speak to it in the future, so that I don't necessarily have to, give those tweaks. And that's not even talk about, like how and what specifically we're doing on the table for calibration. Because again, cupping, and again, I'm sure everybody who listens to this mostly knows what a cupping is, but it's basically the wine tasting for coffee. There's a standardized way of doing it. You do it the same way every single time, and you're basically slurping little spoonfuls of coffee from different regions, and then you're evaluating them for flavor, and you score them for et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, that's like your overarching intro to what is happening there. And it is a lot of fun because you can kind of go deeper and deeper and deeper based on where everybody is.
Yeah. I mean,
in that process,
it seems like from the outside looking in, one of the things that you're walking the group through, which is important in a company, especially of our size, we're not gigantic, but we're not teeny tiny, is developing a common language.
Yes.
Because like you said, you've got Mark with a lot of experience, a very specific set of, tools, and Dulce, a Q grader, a different set of tools.
Yeah. And then, always been specified for her pretty much.
And then in the roastery, what we didn't say is, we've got Johnson, who's a new team leader in the roastery, who has been a team member here for a long time, but doesn't have any roasting experience prior. And then one of the interesting things about coffee is you get 4 people in a room who are all really passionate about it. At some point, their opinions are going to collide and clash, and everybody can't have their way all the time.
For sure.
So there's got to be some way to depersonalize it and then say, okay, this is the style that we're going for in a nutshell overall as our company, right? Like we have a specific take on coffee, which doesn't mean we roast every single coffee the same.
No, yeah.
It means that there are characteristics in coffee that we enjoy, and it's a style in the same way that you would have your own style or dress. You're not wearing the same outfit every day, but I see like, oh yeah, that's Jared, right? Like that's
For sure.
that makes sense.
That's a style.
Yeah. Oh dang it! I was
Mark
gonna
shoes?
put
You're gonna put
money on it. Yeah, but he's not wearing New Balance today. He's wearing Asics.
Oh, man.
He's kind of.
But that's the thing is Mark's got some.
But they are in his style, which is they've got these earthy brown with a little bit of 3M reflective just for spice. They're pretty on brand. Like mostly low tones. It's like 80% mellow, 20% sparkle. Yeah, a little air pocket.
I mean, that's part of
bad.
what we're getting.
It totally
Asics
makes
air.
sense, right? It makes sense.
Well, that common language and exactly what you're speaking to. There are coffees that we will select for our guests that are not my favorite coffee, and that's totally fine because every coffee on everybody's menu can't be specifically curated to be mine, but our approach to them can be something that I take pride in, right? And so it's one of those things. That's actually a huge point of why we are doing all of this, is to recognize multiple things. We have different approaches in roasting to different styles of coffee. We have different coffees chosen to fit in our menu, from more fruity to more balanced and everywhere in between. And so, we'll go on our table sometimes and we'll cup all these things and I'll be like, that's my least favorite coffee. And then, Mark will be like, well, that's our highest selling coffee. And I'm like, great. Like, it's not about me. So, in that regard, the goal for our team, right, is to then get into that coffee. Okay, what can we do to make that coffee the best version we can make it, regardless of how much I love it or don't? And that's where, you do end up checking your ego and be like, can we improve the sweetness? Can we improve the balance of this, that, and the other? Where does it fit on the menu? Is this actually supposed to live in the lighter and brighter and more juicy and acidic place? Can we make sure that that's all balanced and living that dream versus, again, balance is something that we're looking for in our company across the board. We want sweet, we want complex coffees, we want clean ones, we want great finish. And if we can figure out how to do that, regardless of it being, leaning towards what some might call Nordic versus leaning what some might call Frenchy roast, like, again, we are building, my dream is that we're building skill set and professionalism in each of those departments to be applied to what they do. So if we can take a French roasted coffee that is able to take cream and sugar and live in a place where somebody who comes from Major Dickinson's or Starbucks or maybe Phil's, because it's pretty dark too, like, they can come to that coffee and experience a level that's not aggressively different, but even hopefully more complex and more attractive. And if it's not for them, it's not for them too. That's okay. But it's something that we can be proud of because we are looking for that. And that's a skill set that is, one, our team needs to be able to taste the difference so that they can communicate it clearly, but also our roasters need to understand how they can potentially get there. And again, we're not necessarily talking about dialing in some regard. We're talking about palate development, but it's not too indifferent once we figure it out in the roaster. You got kind of a generalized recipe and a generalized scope window of different things based on, though, this is where it gets more complex, like what level of development and flavor and what range you want to hit. Like, you still have all these factors that are the same, but you approach them fairly differently.
What do you think? Okay. One of your... Whoa.
I was strong right
we
then,
broke
apparently.
it, dude. It's broken. So one of the things that you're working on is walking the team through this. And actually, let me pull up the goals exactly, because this will help me.
Yeah. Like in our L.
This will help me better ask you the question that I want to ask.
This is where you're a real professional.
Here we go.
Chris is really good at this game.
Scrolling down, we have too many goals. We have a lot of goals.
Hustle.
Okay, so one of the goals you're working on in the green department is a coffee tasting system that's approved by you and Mark together.
Sure.
And then if I'm going up to the roastery, so this is the one that I was really looking for.
Oh, yeah.
So Johnson, who we spoke about, who's our new team leader in the roastery, and Connor, who's been the coordinator in the roastery. He's got a lot of experience in the roastery.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding what quality coffee tastes like. And we kind of touched on that to where it's, you're leading these cuppings, you're in some way, shape, or form, you talked about some of the coffees on the table aren't your favorite, but you're still kind of setting the North Star for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
How can you tell when you're done with that? And then when you're done with that, so theoretically, at some point, you will have given all of the knowledge you have to give. And if everybody absorbs it, it's like, cool. We can kind of do this on our own now. So it's like, how do you know when that's happened? And then going forward, what's the best way, or how do you foresee checking in on that?
Yeah.
Because it's happened a few times where over the course of several years, we've kind of got our coffee to a certain place, and then there's some sort of cultural drift, despite us having systems in place to make, things happen in a certain way. And one of the things that I kind of trip about is we've never done it like this, and this isn't anything I've thought about except for right now in this moment.
This is how ideas happen, though, guys. Popcorn.
This morning I opened up Basecamp, and Charles said over all of the
financials,
the metrics.
Yeah.
Right. So we've got metrics, and then what we do with the metrics is, okay, everybody owns their own department essentially, but then there's a bigger crossover, especially with the ownership group and the upper leadership group, to where we're kind of talking through these things all together and figuring out if we're on track and how we can bring in more ideas to get more performance or, execute on our goals better. It's like, but we don't really do the same thing with coffee as a company or upper leadership group. We've never done like cool. Every quarter,
right,
we're just going to cup with everybody, have this bigger conversation about it, and have everybody, anyway, that's just something that I thought about.
That's a cool thing.
Anyway.
Well, we are,
like, how do you know
that's what we are doing a little bit. Okay. So I guess to start with your question, well, one, I just can't help it. That's what you're doing right there is a little bit what we are also approaching with that group, right? Which is trying to assess like a lot of that. Where do we stand, and what coffees are selling, and question mark why? That's a thing. So maybe I'll get back to that. We'll just earmark that for a half second. When is it done? Right? Is a different place for the different departments. For the roastery, it is it's really fun. One, like, things haven't stuck, and this is. I'd say this is more of a knock to the style, not the leadership, but in some regard, it hasn't stuck because somebody hasn't just owned the system consistently. The leaders have, for whatever reason, some being totally legit. We move into a huge place, we get an account for a year called Meta, and all of a sudden we're crank zone, right? And it's just like we're busier than we've ever been, and we're trying to figure out how to just keep up. And so, making sure that we do the best job as we can and get the coffee out the door at the quality that makes sense with them and all of our guests, wholesale partners already, takes precedent over sometimes maintaining the system of cupping with the team and educating them and making sure that they understand how to perfectly hit things, which I don't love, none of us love, but that I'm just giving examples of things that can happen in your business too, that like you sometimes have to just kind of swallow and figure out, we only have this many people doing this job and this is what happens. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't continue to do X, Y, and Z, but it means sometimes there's distractions. Right. So that has happened in the past.
Totally.
What I'm very excited about is the hunger for that mix of quality focus, repetition, understanding how to, and this is a little bit me too, like helping them see that things are doable because I have the experience where sometimes they don't. So where we're starting there, right? Johnson and Connor being able to understand quality coffee. One, we're at a cupping table. We're calibrating with multiple leaders, not only with me too. Like Mark and Dulce can very much help this team understand this. So this doesn't require me day in and day out. So they're tasting coffee together more than I am with them. There are some specific calibration tastings and fun tastings we're doing to elevate. That's happening. I'm in the roastery with them here and there, making sure that they understand how to hit our roast curves and know how to, adjust for X, Y, and Z. And that again comes back to the cupping table. If we want to change something in our coffee, how can they approach it on their own? Some of which I come in and it's great. This is a relationship that we have. Johnson asked, hey, you took an approach on this coffee that sits in the night shift. It looks really good. I would never have thought to do that. There's a couple other coffees we want to develop. Could you come next week and stand and roast them and try some things, because your intuition suggests different pathways than we have even a sense of going, right? So what I'll do there is essentially give them, a broader expanse. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying very intentionally to not give them everything up front, right? You have to build them up. Like we were talking about at the beginning. If they're a brand new barista, aka a brand new roaster, first things first, do you know what to do to make sure that this line and this line match up? And that gives you, mechanics. Do you comprehend? And this is challenging for anybody in barista world. Like, you can go on YouTube and can we comprehend the concepts and the ideas and what we're trying to do? And they can be like, yes. And then it's like, now can you integrate them into tasting and feeling and being a part of who you are in this job? And that's on the table. We're tasting it. And then we're calibrating, like, are you tasting what you're doing in there? And do you know what to do with it? And so that's the roastery part, is they are grasping that little by little. On the table, we did this. It tastes like this. Maybe it's a little dry. Maybe it's out of balance in acidity. Maybe even it tastes amazing on the table, but it's meant for espresso. And we go to pull it on espresso, and it's quite a bit drastically like in a direction that we didn't expect. So we need to take it and adjust. The starting point has basically been, can they taste what we taste? And then the next section, which has been awesome, is showing them ways to improve it physically, right? Here's some directional opportunities in how we approach a roast curve. And then what they're doing this week for the first time, and I'm excited about, is, for a lot of them, I'm not standing with them. I'm like, you guys know now some of the things that can make, development percentage, time, temperature start, temperature finish, et cetera, et cetera. Like, what you can play with in this matrix. And I need you now to go R&D on your own and make some decisions. Because if I'm standing there with you, I'm not going to be able to help but kind of point you in the right direction.
Yeah, you're just going to be a babysitter.
Yeah, and totally. And it comes to, again, it's back to what we were talking about with being overly passionate about a product, like i.e. even like the espressos and the coffees. It's like, you're not tasting this, you're not seeing that, you're not seeing that. Like, and all of a sudden they're just, you're robotically programming them to not critically think about what's happening, right? So I'd say, again, that was a long explanation for people to understand the complexity of the situation. But at the end of the day, can they come to the cupping table, taste all the coffees, hear all the feedback from myself, Dulce, Mark, whomever, themselves, hopefully, too, with the palate development? And do we all understand the same thing? And can they take that now without us telling them what to do? Mark, Dulce, in terms of in the roaster, can they go and be like, oh, I hear you. We need a little more sweetness. I'm going to go try these things. And it's not necessarily like checking in with any of the three of us is, am I going in the right direction? It's, okay, I got that. I'm going to try some things and we'll bring it back next week. And then they'll tell us, here's what I did, here's what I did, here's what I did. After we cup it, after we taste it, and we decide this is the one, and then it'll be like, what did I do? And they'll tell us. And that's my quarter one goal with them. And I genuinely believe by the end of this quarter, they're going to be really close to, if not clearly there.
Yeah.
The part that I won't be able to speak to, and again, this is where it's just like being fair, is, on the cupping table, being able to taste on the same level as someone like Mark, who's been in this industry for, 10 plus years, to somebody who's been in it for 2 to 3, like you just
really, it's a really tough one.
You have to be, I mean, and I give them homework. Hey, taste the coffees, even in the cafe, taste a few of them every single day. Cause you can passively learn a lot by just putting coffee on your palate, different coffees on your palate every day. And that was, for love of the game, what we did when we didn't have anybody else to guide us either. It was just taste them.
I'm trying to think. So when we were doing barista competition stuff, how long we'd been in the industry for, because it's easy to say now, oh, we've been in it for 20 whatever years. But even back then I felt like a professional, and it maybe hadn't been an incredibly long time.
I didn't, but no, I hear you. I think feeling like a professional and understanding what I'm trying to taste though was at least 5 years.
Yeah, that
like
sounds
on a
about
proper
right.
level,
Yeah.
right? Just because like the buildup was, does this taste good? And that took some time, right? Can I pour latte art and make the microfoam? And for us, we get to barista competition, and you were a little further ahead in your development than I was, but you get there and then you learn what you don't know. And even then it starts with, okay, I just need to pick a different coffee. And it has nothing to do at that time with like, everybody's got more information now, but at that time you didn't know what you were dissecting per se for a while. At least I didn't know that I was like picking, I mean, shit, dude, the second competition, it was like, we got a Tanzania Peaberry. And it was just like 2 coffees that were roasted. And it was like, it's from Tanzania, so it's good, And then the third one was, well, this guy Tom Owens has good coffees, so I'm going to get them. And it was just like 2 Brazil. Actually, it wasn't Tom Owens. It might have actually been like Barnett, like a couple Brazilian coffees.
If you said Brazil, it's probably Barnett.
It was Brazil for sure, Barnett. But you know what I'm saying? It was like, that was the next thing. It was like, well, this guy has been in the industry and he definitely knows good coffee. So I'm and then it was just like, here's kind of what I'm tasting in it, I think, and make a cool sig drink.
Yeah,
it was not until
it's hard to really articulate how undeveloped the green buying and roasting, all that shit.
Yeah, it's come so far.
It's like
so far.
Relationship coffee was not very common. Quality standards for green were a lot lower.
Mm-hmm.
The bulk of people at the time weren't using any kind of roasting software like Cropster. Most people were roasting by hand, by feel.
Totally. By feel, by end temp and time.
Yeah. There's
like almost exclusively. Like probably not even a lot of gas adjusting. Very little.
I mean, it's just so strange to think that you have no data log for anything,
right?
And the coffee quality was just, overall lower.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. And then, which actually made it a lot of work as a barista, because a lot of the work that I felt like I did as a barista was trying to figure out the best way to present a coffee that sometimes wasn't always very good.
For sure.
Which is really where I think the OG old school ristretto comes from. It's if
squish it.
Yeah, squish it. You know what I mean?
And then it tastes good in milk no matter what.
Right. If it's medium-ish plus roasted and it's low quality coffee, if you tried one of those 1-to-3 ratio shots that you might get now, oh my God, it would taste like garbage, So you're going to compact it, keep the front end sweetness, try to get rid of as much of that back end dryness as possible. Yeah. And it tastes like chocolate.
Yeah, make it thick.
You're also, it's chocolately.
Totally.
This is nice
and really concentrated.
Nice and creamy.
There's flavors.
Yeah, there's flavors.
And actually, when you pull on that short, if it's in the, and I guess this is where maybe the skill set for all those old school baristas was really awesome for the good ones, is you would find the spot where it was short enough to have a really long, delicious finish.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that was the best about it, is like it'd be so intense and then the finish would go because you found that place in extraction before it was like funky and after it was salty. and then it would kind of develop on your palate. And a lot of people, I mean, they're still good. It's just a different style.
Have you had a shot of Hayes Valley recently?
No.
I've had it every once in a while.
Well, actually, that's not true. I had one, I don't know, a few months, like in October, I'd say, or November.
The geek in me wants to bring a scale in because I'm looking at some of
they're
these
short,
shots.
like 19
and I'm
grams,
thinking,
20?
Maybe 15 grams out. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like smaller.
Yeah.
20 grams would be a generous
I haven't had
assertion.
one quite that small, but it was about, mine was about 20.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Every time I see it, and I'm just like, wow, that's tiny. And
Still got it.
Up,
yeah. Brings you right back.
Brings you right
back into time.
Brings you right back. Yeah. So we're doing a couple things. You're talking about helping people understand the why behind what they're doing. Because if you wanted to just simply take someone into the roastery and teach them to hit a roast curve, that's actually not that hard.
No,
I don't think.
No, agreed.
I mean, in the same way that if I brought a barista into the cafe and said, we're going to do this set of specs, i.e. input, output, and time, it's not really that tricky. There's not a ton of steps involved, but to understand what each phase of the roast is doing to the flavor and which part to manipulate when things are going not as well as you'd like, or to improve the quality, that's a completely different thing than simply tracing a curve. That's a much bigger lift. In the same way, dialing in espresso, it's like, cool, I can give you a recipe and you can understand the fundamentals and you can hit it. But if I give you a coffee you've never had before and say start from scratch, it's a different thing.
I mean, that to me is, and I'll even use your example of the Hayes Valley Espresso, but that's to me the point, and the moniker of a professional is, and somebody who really knows what they're doing, is taking a generalized concept and vision of where something is going and then finding a way to optimize it to best fit that place. If you took, like, an example that I would want to be able to give to our pros in here would be something to what you just said. Make me a 20-gram shot of coffee that tastes epic. And you know what I'm saying? And use these coffees. And it's like, the point of that is the skill set ingrained in the person, in the professional. It's not necessarily what we're going to serve.
Right.
It's do you understand how to make this the best it can be, and show me. And that is what we all have to, I mean, that's what a professional and somebody who really cares about their craft does. It's like, to my own, I don't like the one coffee, and I'm not going to say that name because then people are like, oh, Jared doesn't like the coffee, it's a banger. And I don't like that coffee, but it doesn't really matter. We're looking through our guest size, and there's places on our menu that fit as many guests as we can, because we believe that we have a product that's worth sharing. We have a company culture that's worth sharing, and the more we can spread that, the better the world's going to be. So how can we do our best version of something that somebody's going to drink either way? And that's essentially like that's the answer, I guess, for all of those departments, right? You know, you asked, the other part of that question was a QC and cupping system approved by Jared and Mark, right? And talking with Dulce about that one, it's like, she's going to totally do it. It's going to be easy. The only reason it didn't happen before is that somebody just didn't own it. It's not a hugely complicated thing. It's cupping, right? And it's deciding how we as a company cup consistently and score, which we already have, but it's like, the holdup in the past has been, you know, like, well, how do we do it? And it's complicated, and we want them to score this and that. And I'm just like, look, it kind of isn't. I was like, it can be as complicated as we want it to be. And I'll just give an example of what I was talking about to give perspective, because Dulce's taking the Q. It's her job to create it. So there's a Q grading system of cupping that's pretty complex. It's awesome. It works. And
which is based on scoring coffee at X quality level.
Totally. Thank you for that. That for the people out there. So I was like, look, I originally brought back what they did in Honduras because I thought it was really simple and awesome. And she was like, why didn't it take? And I was like, well, I mean, I wasn't in charge of the roastery. So I brought a concept that works, but if they don't like it, or they don't like it's maybe the wrong term. If it's not integrated, it just doesn't integrate. It could work totally fine. It was simple. It was like, come in, all the coffees are already going to be at 80 plus, because maybe we're going to start at 82 because we're not buying coffees that are less than that. So you can't like grade them less than that unless it's a horrible defect. And they can go up to this point, and let's make it simple. There is sweetness, acidity, body, a couple markers, and for each one of them, you can score X amount of points. And at the end, the minimum you can have is 82, and the max you're going to have is 94. And it's on a spreadsheet. It's right there. Everybody can cup. You can log their names. You can log what they had to say about it, and you can log their score, and then it gives an average score. And I'm like, pretty simple. And she's like, why didn't it work? And I was like, well, I don't exactly know. It wasn't my department. Somebody just asked for an idea, and they didn't create it themselves. So you're going to create it. I think that's going to help. Mm-hmm. But secondly, like, if that's too complicated, that's okay. We need it to be consistent. So I was like, what I do with, it was like, whether you like it or not, you could make it as simple as this. You go through and smell the coffee dry, and if you like it, you give it a plus. If you don't like it, you give it a minus. If you love it, you give it 2 pluses. And then you go through and smell it wet, do the same thing, and then you break the crust. That's what I'm saying there. You smell it wet. And then you can set 3 different tasting times. So you can say 10 minutes we taste, 20 minutes we taste, 30 minutes we taste. And at each one of those points, you write down something. It could be sweetness related, acidity related, body related. At the end, you basically have 4 main notes and a thing. And if that's how you want to do it, that is a system that does it the same way every time. That would work. And you're a Q grader. You see everything that could be. So what you do is create something that we can use, that we can all use the same way. And she was like, oh, I totally see the vision. I got it. And I'm like, yeah, you got it. If you make it, we'll follow it. and we can essentially calibrate and make sure that it's, you know, complex enough for us or not too simple that it would make sense. But that is that. And as you take ownership, like, we will approve it, and then you'll teach it, and it'll stay that way forever.
Right.
'Cause that's what we need.
And then you get the framing right as well. Because one of the things that's interesting about scores is you would have a menu. I mean, if you took our menu of coffees and you scored each one, we're going to have a range of scores.
For sure.
So you wouldn't be able to say, okay, we have 90 plus, or everything needs to be, you know, 89, whatever. And some of that's by design. It's like if you took I don't know, like,
Suke versus night shift.
sure,
Yeah.
that's a perfect example. It's like the night shift is objectively going to score lower if you ran it through like a standard Q grader or SCA cupping sheet. But that doesn't mean it's bad. It's filling a slot that it's intended to. It's not trying to masquerade as a 90-point coffee.
Exactly.
That's not what it needs to do. So making that clear that you don't need to, cool, that night shift is never going to be a 90. And that doesn't mean it's bad.
Right.
It's actually exactly as it should be.
Totally.
Sitting in that mid 80s probably somewhere, you know?
Absolutely.
Because it's got an intention behind it.
And that was part of the conversation too, is it's like, she's like, well, how would that work for retail? And I was like, it probably wouldn't. I was like, just make a really, really simple one for retail. It's not about scoring. It's just about teach them how to do a cupping and teach them how to, like, give them something to log, and then have them assess flavors based on sweetness, acidity, body, complexity, and maybe balance of them all. And that's it. And just like, let it be. And that's how you teach retail to do it, because their job isn't to score the coffee anyway. Their job is to understand it better all the time. And so,
because
that
most of your guests aren't coming in saying, I want a 92.
no.
They have maybe an origin in mind, or they maybe have a flavor profile in mind. Or if they're in this espresso world, they have something, you know, specific.
Absolutely.
Like, oh, I make myself a latte every day, or I make myself a single origin espresso every day.
Yeah.
You know, those are two different guests. You're going to recommend two different coffees, and it doesn't matter. The scoring of each doesn't matter. In the same way that if you go into a brewery, you're not saying, I want your award-winning beer.
No.
You're like, hey, I'm looking for an IPA, or I want a lager, or whatever.
Absolutely.
You know, you probably call it by style rather than points. I want something that's 85 plus on the beer review.
What's the gold medal winner for this
Give me a
year?
gold medal winner.
Like something that you'd put
I'm
into
a
the gold-
blogger,
yeah.
and I only write blog about gold medal winner coffees. So I'm here. And if you don't have any gold medal winner, that's fine. You just won't be able to appear in my blog, which is a great marketing opportunity for you guys. All right.
Which one of yours has the most direct connected flavors to the Keystone Ice beer?
Do you have a Q grader on staff? Great. I'd love to talk with her. Can I get a meeting?
Hey everyone, that's the podcast for the week. Thanks so much for listening. If you heard something that inspired you, or if you heard something that gave you more questions than answers, send us an email to podcast@catandcloud.com. And if you're looking to know more about us, then head to our website at catandcloud.com, where you can find everything we have to offer. A great place to start would be The Answer, our house coffee that's right for any occasion. Or the Best Friends Blend, a coffee that tastes just as good as the good it does by donating $1 per pound back to our partnering producers. Also, if you're feeling extra friendly, connect with us in the usual places, like YouTube, Instagram, pretty much everywhere that's hip. All right, that's it. Thanks for being awesome, everyone, and we'll be back next week.